conversation doesn't need to be instantly what's going to happen when someone passes. It's more around, have you given it some thought, posing the question to clients. For us, it's really important to go, how can we use it to make the experience for the clients better? Ultimately, it's the clients that are the most important thing. What are we doing that helps AI enhance the client experience? Getting involved and having that conversation early is really important, and we see those clients that do have the conversation, or at least start it, doing much better on a number of fronts.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with CoreData. I'm Ervin, the head of research, and today I'm joined by Chris Smith, who is the head of private wealth at Shaw & Partners.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, we've recently worked on a project together looking at intergenerational wealth transfer here in Australia. It's one of the things that the industry's been talking about for a while, and everyone's been thinking about. Is this something that is just a hype, or is there something real to it?
Look, I think there's been a lot of talk about it, absolutely, but I definitely don't think it's hype. I think we're in a point now where superannuation in this country started back in the early 90s. This is really the first generation that is starting to hand over that superannuation. So we're seeing a huge transfer of wealth that is absolutely underway, but is going to continue for the next 10 or 20 years. There's something like $4.7 trillion that's going to get handed over across the generations in the next little while. So yeah, no, it's definitely real.
And what do you think is driving this big wealth transfer at the moment?
Look, I think we're seeing the baby boomers getting to the end. Those in their 70s and 80s control a lot of the wealth, and they're starting to get to the point where they are then handing the wealth over to the next generation. We're seeing assets that have been built in different ways to what they might have been being built previously. It's not just the family home anymore. There's certainly superannuation, there's family trusts. There's a lot more complexity to how assets are coming from those high net worths into the next generation. So that's adding complexity and challenges to what we see. And that's something that I think we're struggling to deal with in a number of ways. Certainly we're seeing that with a number of clients at Shaw & Partners.
Right. And what are we struggling with? Are we not having the conversations? Are we not being prepared? What's going on?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I think first and foremost, it's difficult for people to have those conversations. I think we're all somewhat scared of our own mortality, and those conversations are difficult to have no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. So even starting those conversations is something that is proving difficult. If you then can get into those conversations, sometimes the next challenge is the complexity of those conversations. So where do I start? I don't want to deal with it. I don't really know what to talk about. But the most important thing we see, and certainly from some client interactions, is those conversations have got to start. They are starting, but we need to do more of them.
Yeah, right. At the end of the day, we are human, right? No one likes to talk about the end. And to your point, most people are delaying the conversation, kicking the can down the road. I assume that's not a great thing.
No, I don't think it is, but it's very common. It's very easy to go, I'll talk about that or I'll worry about that later. I think even personally, I've got parents that are nearing that age. It's not an easy conversation, even though I'm in the industry and I understand the importance of it. And I think we see that with a number of people. But delaying that conversation can actually have some really adverse effects. Getting involved and having that conversation early is really important, and we see those clients that do have the conversation, or at least start it, doing much better on a number of fronts. I think when you look at how those interactions can occur between both, those that are handing and those that are receiving the assets or the wealth, getting involved early and having those conversations is really important.
Right. And in your experience, what is the biggest pitfall, or what really goes wrong if these things aren't planned for?
Look, I think first and foremost, if you delay the conversation, you might find yourself in a position whereby something unexpected happens, and decisions made under pressure are never as good as decisions made early. We are seeing also it's not just those that are receiving the wealth, it's those that are close. So it could be the partner if one spouse passes away, as an example. They don't know where to go, they don't know who to talk to. In some cases, they don't even know where the assets are. That could have been alleviated if those conversations were had earlier. Sometimes the role of people is not widely understood. There's not that education piece. In some cases, people don't know what being an executor means. They don't understand the implications of if the assets are in a superannuation structure or out of a superannuation structure. So having those conversations early with those participants can reduce some of the, I suppose, antagonism that could happen later on, and also reduce the need for, conflict that happens right at the time because you've got to do something.
Yeah, and that's the 2 points that come up a lot in the conversations, right? People not thinking about the full breadth or complexity of it. Everyone thinks, I'm just going to get money. Someone needs to execute, someone needs to be the legal representative of the estate and that sort of thing. So that's something that advisors can help with, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of complexity. I think, as I touched upon before, the nature of these assets and the different structures means that it's not just as simple as handing over money. What we're also seeing is sometimes those that are receiving the wealth are not as well equipped to deal with those assets. They're probably receiving the wealth at a later stage than they might have 20 years earlier. I think we're living longer. And in that case, debt reduction is probably not as important as it may have been. And some of those receiving the wealth are not equipped to deal with those assets. What's the best way of handling this asset from not just a tax point of view, but from a legacy point of view, from a how am I setting my kids up? How am I ensuring that this is the best way forward? So absolutely trying to engage all people at an early point is absolutely fundamental. The other thing that is often an inhibitor is it's too big, it's too complex. I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do. And what we see is where you can start that conversation, particularly with an education piece, helping people understand some of the implications, that's more likely to lead to a conversation where they can start to then talk about, okay, the context, their roles, how this could play out. That's well before you even get to the point where you start to talk about, who gets what and the fairness of what happens. Sometimes people jump to the latter and think that that's the most important thing. And what we find is starting the conversations early around the education and the context leads to a better outcome and a better understood process when it comes to actually what are we going to do with it and who's going to get it.
Yeah, right. There's two things you've brought up that I found really interesting. One, the need or the want to avoid conflict and how kicking the can down the road
Yep.
actually just creates more conflict at a later stage.
Yep.
But going to the topic of fairness, how do you see that play out within, in your experience? How are clients dealing with fairness? What is fairness?
Yeah, look, it's a really important topic of conversation, and what's fair to one may not appear fair to someone else. I think, I've got two children and I hope they don't listen to this, but if they do, you might help one child in a different way to the other one. One may need more financial assistance, one may need more emotional assistance, as the case may be. I don't think that's that different playing out when it comes to intergenerational wealth transfer. It's the same concept. The other thing we have in the world, which is probably different to sort of 20 odd years ago, is there's more complexity. We've got blended families. We've got a whole host of other things that can challenge those fairness conversations. The concept of a blended family can make transferring wealth far more complicated than it may have ordinarily been.
Yeah, that's something we're seeing quite a lot in our research as well, right? So people feeling that it is more complex, it is more challenging. There are more people that will contest the will these days, for example. Advice, does that play a big role in helping the inheritors receive the money well and deal with it?
Yeah, look, obviously, I would say yes, and
Yeah.
I genuinely think it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think not only for those that are passing the wealth on, ensuring that their legacy is upheld and/or their needs and wants are managed the way in which they'd hope they would, but really from those receiving the wealth, having good advice is fundamental. We do see stats where 10 20% goes to lifestyle assets and there's a certain portion to debt reduction. Post that though, there's actually a lot of wealth that goes into, okay, how am I establishing that wealth in a tax efficient, an appropriate way of helping not just myself perhaps, but also my children. And if they don't have that advice, there's a very high chance that they're not going to get the best outcome. So the advice for those that are receiving the wealth is incredibly important. I think also from the advice community, engaging with that next generation, engaging with the spouses is really, really important. We've seen a number of case studies where, put simply, having the partner he or she may not have been as engaged with someone and getting them involved so that if something does happen to one partner, the other one knows where to go and who to talk to. Because in many cases, it happens unexpectedly at times, unfortunately, and therefore they're not well equipped to do it. And then the beneficiaries, again, if they haven't been engaged with an advisor or understand what their options are and how best to handle this wealth that's coming in, it leads to poor outcomes. And we've seen that again and again.
Yep. And in the research we've just done, a big driver of a successful transfer is simply the advisor knowing the family, right? Before the event itself, that relationship's already there. It's not coming in at a time where everyone's emotionally frayed and challenged. Um, in your opinion, for an advisor, how do you start that conversation with the broader family early?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question and it's really difficult. And I think the simple premise is you've got to start it somewhere. You've got to start having that. There are some tips and tricks as to how best to frame that with the client. But I think if I go back to that education piece is probably the first starting point, followed by some context of why it's so important to have that advice. And what we are seeing, particularly at Shaw & Partners, is a number of advisors look to engage with the broader family earlier, have that conversation. That conversation doesn't need to be instantly what's going to happen when someone passes. It's more around, have you given it some thought, posing the question to clients. And in very many cases, the clients will say, I haven't. Okay, well, that's a great opening to, this is some of the pitfalls of if you haven't, why you should. In some cases, the client will go, oh, look, I'll do it later. Well, I'll tell you why it's important that we start having it now. We don't need to solve everything now, but we do need to start thinking about how we're going to have those conversations. I can speak very personally. My father-in-law as an example, he's always been, strong, independent, no thought for anything, but even he has engaged recently and said, look, we should talk about that to make sure that my mother-in-law is across the different things. I think that's absolutely happening across Australia.
Yeah, that is definitely something I think people are getting more awareness of, especially the advised. Yeah. For an advisor, how does this help you in terms of practice longevity or advisor longevity?
Yeah, look, I don't think you need to be Einstein to understand that, an advisor's business is predicated on providing services to clients. And when clients pass, if you're not looking after the next gen, well, it becomes more difficult. But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I think in many cases, advisors genuinely want to look after their clients, and looking after their clients often involves getting closer and understanding their families. So I think from an advisor's point of view, yeah, there's some obvious business case benefits for making sure that you've got the next generation. But I think more broadly, you wanting to look after the client and doing that to the best of your ability means that you should be engaging with the broader family.
Excellent. That's definitely what we think about when we think about taking care of a client holistically, right? Everyone within their sphere. Chris, any kind of words of wisdom for advisors looking to handle this conversation with their clients, in a quick kind of 10-second?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to start the conversation.
Yep.
You've also got to be brave enough to, if the client doesn't want to have it, you've got to help them have that conversation. I don't think it's a case of letting the can get kicked down the road. I think that's, forget about your own business for a second. I think it's irresponsible for the client. I think you really need to be pushing that. Doesn't mean you need to solve the discussion straight away, but you should be having that conversation and you should be pushing clients to at least think about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Get started, right? At very least, get started. Thank you so much for that, Chris. I think we might want to touch on another topic now that the industry has also been talking about for a while in the last 12 months, and that's obviously AI. Everywhere AI, you go, right? Every trade. Yeah, you've heard of it. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Every magazine you open, every time you open LinkedIn, it's everywhere. What do you think of it for the industry? Is it a flash in the pan? Is it going to keep going? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it is everywhere. And I think there's no doubt, even in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, we've definitely seen a push where it's indisputable that it's going to form an integral part of all of our lives, whether we're in wealth management or not. I think everyone from, the 17-year-old trying to do a faster university essay or the 65-year-old trying to book their holiday more efficiently is using AI in some capacity. And wealth management is no different. So I think for anyone that thinks, it doesn't affect me, I think is crazy. It is absolutely here to stay, and it is absolutely important to engage with it. At Shaw & Partners, we've taken a bit of an approach that, we probably tried to run at it a little bit earlier, like many firms. I think we've stepped back a little bit because we've understood a little bit more around how it can be utilised. And I think now it's, okay, we've understood enough to know it is here to stay. How do we adapt and how do we engage with it?
Yep. And with a firm at the size of Shaw & Partners, what are you doing in terms of day-to-day, embedding AI within the workflows, the processes, and helping advisors serve clients?
Yeah, look, good question. I think first and foremost, some of those sort of maybe mistakes that we made early, trying to go a little bit too early, we've now reflected and we've gone, it's absolutely imperative to have the data controlled and to ensure that we've got that security for both clients and advisors. So now that we've got ourselves to a point where that's covered, we can, I think, move forward a lot faster than we could. I think we want to be adopters, but not first. We're not going to charge at the hype. We want to be, measured and thoughtful in our approach. So the data has been the first and foremost. And then what we've also done is made sure that every staff member is curious and has the I suppose, ability to engage with it at the speed that suits them. I am a huge advocate for you've got to get out there and do it. And I think if you look across the workforce of Shaw and Partners, everyone is engaging with it. And how they're engaging is something that I think, for me personally, it's really important that people don't focus on it's going to make my life more efficient. That's a common, I think, you hear that, like everyone's telling you how they can make their life more efficient through AI. I think Shaw and Partners, whilst that's important, I think that efficiency arms race, if you like, will continue and that will play out and we'll be a part of that as with any other wealth management firm. But for us, it's really important to go, how can we use it to make the experience for the clients better? Ultimately, it's the clients that are the most important thing. What are we doing that helps AI enhance the client experience? And that is where we're challenging our staff to think a little bit differently. The efficiencies on their tasks and file notes and doing things, that will always come. But how are we using AI to make the experience for the client better? That's the thing that we're focusing on.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's good that, it's quite telling that the first thing you said was we squared away all the data privacy issues. We squared away the foundations of good AI, data privacy, making sure your clients are always protected. That comes around to the conversation around what can you do for clients using AI? What is the best outcome for the clients? Do you think AI has fundamentally or functionally changed the philosophy behind advice delivery at Shaw and Partners?
I don't think it's changed the philosophy. I think looking after your client and doing the best for them is at the heart of what we do, and most wealth management firms, to be fair. But in terms of how we implement that, I think AI has changed it. There's no doubt that you'll be able to do some tasks more efficiently than you have in the past. And as I said, that's a component of it. But fundamentally, at the premise here is, how do we look after the clients better? So what can we do using AI? And that could be something as simple as making sure that the advisor is asking better questions because they're better armed with the interactions they've had with the client in the past. There are a lot of things that you can do that if you twist it around, it's not about the advisor or the firm, it's about the client. I think that are fundamental to how you can make AI a better experience. And ultimately, the philosophy is still the same. We've still got to look after clients, just as we've spent time talking about that intergenerational wealth piece and the importance of looking after the client. The philosophy is the same. How you do it may shift. You might find that tasks that used to take a certain amount of time are done more efficiently, so an advisor can spend more time with clients understanding there might be more face-to-face time. Because I think at some point, the thing that's really important that a robot can never do is a little bit like what we're doing today. It's talking face-to-face. So if you can free up some time and make sure that the advisor can spend more time looking after the client, well, I think that's a great outcome for all. So the philosophy hasn't changed. It's just the implementation.
Yeah, right. At the end of the day, AI is a tool to help advisors be more efficient in terms of clearing out things that are lower value, so to speak, so that they can focus on their clients, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Look, I mean, as much as you don't like to draw parallels, I think AI is not dissimilar from a number of technology changes that we've seen, whether it's the internet coming in 33 years ago or whether it's the mobile phone. The premise is still there. Advice existed back then and will continue to exist. It's how you do it and how you adapt with those changes. So I think, yes, it can help both advisors and clients, and we're certainly engaging all of our staff to make sure that they are using it. But the thing that I'm really encouraging them to do is look and think about the client first. So the efficiencies will come. I've no doubt that will happen. And I hear a lot of firms talk about we can do, work in a more efficient time. That's great. How does that help the client?
Yep. I think with that lens in mind, the client comes first. That's going to resolve a lot of these questions. What can we do with the tool? Chris, thank you so much for your time. It's been great having you on this podcast.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being here, and thank you both to yourself and Andrew and CoreData. We've really enjoyed working together and look forward to continuing to do so.
I know it's a lot of thanks, but thank you also for listening to the podcast. Please, if you have any questions, get in touch with Chris or myself.